Hello guys, I hope you are doing good. Welcome to another video. Today we are going to solve another JavaScript problem. This problem is related to a design pattern where we have to implement publisher subscriber design pattern, shortly known as PubSub, where we can subscribe to multiple events, and then once the data is published it will be available to all the events which is subscribed. For example, on the screen you can see we have to create this events function that will have subscribe, subscribe once async, and then publish and publish all function. And if you see, we create an instance of events, and then after that we subscribe with the namespace. So let's say we subscribe to the new user and we have a callback function over here. Whenever the event is published for the namespace new user, the value that is passed, it will be accessible to all the subscribed users. So in case if there is another subscription and if you publish for new user, if you publish it for new user, it will be available for both the subscribers. This subscribe function returns a remove function that we can use to unsubscribe to the event or get itself removed from the subscription, so that it won't no longer will get the published data. There is also a publish all event. Publish all will publish all the events that are being added to the database irrespective and with the given value. So we have to create this. Now we'll start with the subscribe first, and then later we'll move to subscribe once and subscribe once async. So let's start implementing this. To store the callbacks, I'm creating a map over here. So a variable this dot subscription list equals to new map. What we are going to do is, in the subscribe, it is going to accept the namespace, which is the name, and the callback, and we have to store this. So first thing we are going to check is const exist. If not, this dot subscription list dot has name. So if the name does not exist, what we are going to do is this dot subscription list dot set name, and then in the array we are going to set the callback, because under a single name there can be multiple callbacks. So that's why we are using an array to store the callback. So if the namespace does not exist, we are creating a new entry, and if it exists, what we are going to do is we are going to merge the data with the previous one. So const existing callbacks, and we are going to this dot subscription list dot get, and we'll pass the name, and after that we are going to this dot subscription list dot set the name with the existing and the new callback. Now this will store the data. Now from this subscribe function we have to return a method dot remove, so that we can use it to remove or unsubscribe to the callback. So what we are going to do over here is we are going to return an object because that is the method. So methods are available on the object, that's why we are going to return an object here, and from this remove is the name of the method, and we are going to get the callback, all the callbacks. So we are going to get all the callbacks and we are going to filter so existing callbacks. This is an array. We are going to filter it, and then from this we are going to remove the current callback so that it is throwing an error. If the error is not very cannot assign to read only filtered. This is a function, and now after that, once we have removed, we are going to set it back to the subscription list. So here let's copy this and then just pass the filtered. Now because we are returning a function, returning an object here, we are forming a closure with the remove method, this object, so it will be able to access or remember the callback even after the execution has completed, so that in case in future if we invoke the remove, it will remove this callback function. So now let's test the code. Let me update the publish as well. So publish takes the name and the data. So name and data, and what it will do is it will get the list dot get the name, and then for callbacks, let me call this callbacks, and then for all the callbacks we have to invoke with the data. So it will invoke each of the callback with the data. Let's see if it is working or not. Let me uncomment this part. So callbacks dot for each, and see if I run this again, you will see that sending Q1 to John. So what we did is we created new subscription, we subscribed the new user, and we are printing this log sending Q1 news to payload. After that we have published the event, so with the data John, that John has been passed to this callback function which has printed sending Q1 news to John. So after publishing, our subscriber has received the data. Let me uncomment this too. This is another subscription that has been created. So let me reload this. You'll see that the first part is we have created this subscription in which we are sending it to Q1 news. So here when we publish John, John is received by Q1. Now later we have created, assigned another callback or subscribed another time to the new user saying Q2 news, and then to that we are passing do. So when we publish the new user, it has invoked both the callbacks, the first callback which is sending Q1 news, and then the second one is sending Q2 news. Now if I come back and if I remove this, the first subscription, you'll see that when we first publish the event, it will print sending Q1 news to John. This will print Q1 and Q2 news to Do, and this will remove the subscription. Now after this, if I publish something, so what will happen is it will only pass the data to Q2 news. Q1 news is unsubscribed. So see, after first call we send to, from here line number 44, this has triggered and it has sent the callback or published the data to Q1 news. On line number 52, it has published the data to Q1 and Q2 both, because under the new user there are two callbacks. After that, we removed one callback, the first one. So if you publish after that, you see that the foo is passed only to the second callback, which is sending Q2 news, and we are getting foo. Similarly, if I comment these things and if I publish all, so you'll see that the foo bar is passed. So okay, I think we haven't implemented publish all. Let's implement that too. So for the publish all, what we have to do is we have to get all the namespace in the subscription list. So we can use the entries directly from the list. So call it key and value of let's get the entries this dot subscription list dot entries. I think the entries is a function. So entries gives a iterable. Entries is a function. Okay, let's do one thing. Remove this, and then here value is the array of callbacks that are stored under the map. So value dot for each, and to that we have to pass the data, and publish all will accept the data. So let's see, invalid attempt to iterate, and what if we return? Okay, so here we have passed the method brackets, and see the foo bar is being returned. So when we invoke the publish all, it is passing the foo bar to Q2 because we have unsubscribed from the first subscription. If I comment this line, you'll see that it will pass the data to both Q1 and Q2. Now our simple PubSub implementation is working fine. The next implementation is we have to create subscribe once. So for subscribe once, what you can do is we can create a separate list. So they start subscription once list. This is just for our use case. I'm separating this because this is subscribe once, right? We don't have to have the remove method because once the data is published to it, it will be removed. And here we'll accept the name and the callback, and we'll pass that to the subscription once list. And now in the publish, what we'll do is const subscribe once callbacks. So what we'll do is we'll just subscription once list. From this we'll get the name, all the callbacks, and once this will also publish the data. And once this is done, what we are going to do is we are going to subscribe once list, and then we are going to empty the list. So set name with the empty array. Why? Because once the data is published for subscribe once, they are no longer of use. They cannot be republished. So what we do is we empty the list after the subscribe once has been fired. So let's come down and check Let me uncomment this and add another line, put twice. It is saying cannot read. Cannot read properties of undefined reading fallback. Callbacks are there. Restart subscription. Restart create name. Where's the error? This is same. Subscribe once in the function. We are setting it. Then in the publish, this dot subscription list dot get data. Subscription list is there. Once list. Cannot read properties of undefined reading for each. Callbacks, does it not return something, or empty array? Okay, that should do the work. So see, if I run this again, you will see that we are getting I'm invoked once. So the twice part is never invoked, because after invoking once we have reset the list in the map. Similarly, for the subscribe one async, this is little bit different. In the async function, what we have to do is we have to return a promise. So subscribe once async will return a promise, and once that promise is resolved, then only the function will be invoked, the callback function. So what we have to do over here is, again we are just going to create a new list. This dot subscribe once async list, and then here we'll just accept the name, because the callback function is passed once the promise is resolved. So this will only accept the name, and here we are going to return new promise, under which we'll have the resolve and reject. And then we'll add the same thing, but this time in the async list we are going to add, but rather than storing the callback, here we are going to store the resolve method, because only once it is resolved. So we'll invoke resolve. Resolve is resolve the promise, and after that this async, once async will resolve, it will return a new promise. To that we'll pass the callback function that will print the data. So that's why we are storing the resolve as it is in the map, and we'll invoke this. So under the publish, we are going to copy this once, then subscribe once async list, we are going to get async callbacks, and we are going to reset that. So now if you see, if I come back and if I invoke, you see that I'm getting IAM once invoked once async. So this data is passed to the callback function once it is resolved. So this is how you can create a pub sub with multiple variations. This is the last part where we have to asynchronously invoke, right? Where we have to create the async function. It is a little bit trickier because we have to store the resolve method itself in the call rather than a callback, because once it is resolved, it will invoke the dot then part of the promise that holds the callback function. So I hope you have learned something new today. Thank you for your time.